Let's bring out our panel right now. And again, we're going to cover a bunch of topics tonight here, and we've got an interesting panel for that. Doug Wilson's a former producer for ABC's Wild World of Sports. He knew Ali personally and saw him recently. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Scott Vanderhoff, a former five-term Republican Rockland County executive, co-chair of the Palisades Institute of Dominican College. And we'll talk about politics a little bit later on the program, but obviously, today defined here by a man who defined a generation and then something else. And there's so many different ways that we could go, Doug, but start from when you first came across Ali the boxer, the Olympian, and then obviously the world champ, and then the icon. But start first with the young boxer.
Well, the young boxer was always great to be around. I remember the first time I ever saw him, I was in Miami Beach and for a football game. And we were going to a stadium for a fight the night before. He wasn't fighting, but suddenly in front of us, stopping us from going into was this tall, really good-looking guy in a sort of a beige suit with beige, and he told us that he was going to be the next world heavyweight champion of the world, and he was going to be the undercard for some fight. You want to watch out and look out for me. And that was my first impression. I looked down, I looked up, and I said, who is this brash, loudmouth, overconfident?
And you had a preview of sorts, though, from the Olympics, where he first burst on the scene.
Well, yeah, that was actually in 1960 when he was, and I was at home watching, and those days, I'm 80, but I'm not that old.
But that was his first foray into that.
Yeah, and there were rumors that too, where he was disenchanted when he got home. He had the gold medal. He was a true Olympic champion, and he didn't get a parade in Louisville, and he still couldn't go into restaurants. And I think I just have a feeling. I never spoke to him about this or anything, but I think I have a feeling that those little seeds of disenchantment set the stage for what he eventually stood up for.
You know, Dominic, a lot of the speeches today, but also in the run-up to today, what struck me was how many people your age, even a little younger, that grew up, black kids without dads in many cases, and they said, you know, when people say he was like a father to me, they think we're joking, but he wasn't.
No, it's not
a
joke.
He made me,
it's not a
and
joke.
One guy said something that stuck with me. He said, he made me walk taller. He made me realized that I didn't have to take anything off of anybody, and I should be proud for who I was. I heard it enough that it didn't just sound like a soundbite, that for a generation, he was defiant, but he was principled.
Let's put it this way. I know personally about 100 kids that Muhammad Ali never met, and he was a father figure to all of us via the media, via television, via his fights. He's someone who transcended race, transcended politics, transcended religion, and just to observe him, I mean, look at what he did. The Nation of Islam is still controversial, okay? In the year 2016, he stood with the Nation of Islam many, many years ago and was unapologetic. That was the other thing that he taught us. Be unapologetic, do it with class, have dignity, and carry yourself well.
And it's amazing, Scott, the transformation in the public eye, because you ask anybody, where were you when there was Ali Frazier 1, 2, 3? Where were you when he fought Foreman? Where were you when Norton? People will remember exactly what. People have no appreciation when they look at the boxing game now and the alphabet soup with all the divisions, and you can't name, half the guys if you're even lucky. But you can say where you were when those fights happened, and you had a clear rooting interest one way or the other. Other than Pele, he's the only guy globally that everybody knew from the world of sports.
Absolutely. And he was so damn good. I mean, he was just... I still watch some of the old fights and how quick and the flurries, and he back away, people are swinging in the air. He was so good. And yeah, a lot of people, when he became Muhammad Ali after Cassius Clay and then decided not to be part of the draft, many of us on either side of the issue of Vietnam saying, you know, it's just a show. It wasn't a show. And that's what I think is so remarkable. It was sincere. And it's the thing that we all grew to love about him, was that he really stood up for what he believed in.
Because a lot of people, and I went through this, and it's interesting, I had a conversation with people who, he was a contemporary of him, and they held a dim view of people who might have run to Canada. But they said, he lost 3.5 years of his prime. He paid a price for it, but he didn't run. And while they may have disagreed with his positions, that was part of the reason why he carried the Olympic torch at the end. And if not reinvented himself, maybe people came around to him. But at the end here, if somebody told you, you know, in the early 70s, that Muhammad Ali would have been at one point the most beloved figure at those games, you would never have believed it, right?
You would never believe it, you know. It brings to mind Howard Cosell, because
And for our audience who doesn't connect the two, you had a connection there. ABC, the Wild World, it was your home.
Sure.
You had a front row seat to not only some of the great sporting events, but also Howard Cosell and him, which were, you know, made for each other.
Yeah, there was magic when they spoke and when they interviewed, and it was, you're always laughing just thinking about it, right?
Yes.
But I think there's an underlying reason that worked out so well, and this is my opinion. When he first changed his name, and now it's accepted, you know, we don't even think about it, but it was a very controversial matter. A lot of people didn't. They kept calling him Muhammad Ali, also known as, and all that stuff that went back in those times. People weren't big fans of that. Howard Cosell went on the air as not to defend Ali. He never would go on and make it, but he did an editorial from a legal point of view. Howard was a lawyer. From a legal point of view, saying he had every right to be called whatever he wanted to be called. And then later on, when they took away his crown and took away his license to fight and took away his passport, Cosell went on the air again as a legal matter, not as a saying, oh, this is wrong, but he, as a legal matter, said what they had done was absolutely against the law.
And the Supreme Court eventually found it the same
Absolutely.
way.
Well, I think Ali knew, of course he knew that, and I think the black community connected with that too, and that's why Cosell was so beloved universally in that world, and that's why I think their magic, they trusted each other.
Well, and they were fun to watch. I mean, it was the fight, and it was also their repartee. I mean, what they did, you never knew what was going to happen, you know. And gosh, it was really good television.
And what you could tell. Now you are a witness to history, but watching the television, Cosell and Ali, they were doing their little game, but you could tell that they genuinely liked each other. Is that a fair
Total
assessment?
respect and liked.
Yes. And so, Richard, just to watch those moments, to watch Muhammad Ali, he talked about the problems of urban America that we're dealing with today, back in the 70s, and called it to the T. If you ever watched that documentary, I forgot what the name
We Were
was.
Kings.
We Were Kings. Watch a little bit of it. He was a
Why Were
master,
Kings? I'm sorry, yep.
master showman. He taught all the guys that came after him, you know, and he was a man among men in terms of standing out and above and teaching so many urban kids like myself, stand with dignity.
And you know what was, people take for granted, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was Lou Alcindor before Ali became Ali. People followed steps. And then also, he wasn't just a firebrand. He took elements in the black community to task as well here. In fact, one of the lines he said is, racism is wrong. I don't care which color is doing the hating, it's wrong. And people gave him credit that when things were burning and cities were burning up here, he didn't pour gasoline on those fires. And certainly, he had a controversial, but the Parkinson's aspect to me was the amount of people and families. I know there's people at home that are living through this right now, but he didn't shutter the doors. he went out, and the fact that you could have courage with billions of the world watching you, and with a trembling hand when you were the baddest man on the planet at one point in your life, to try and light that flame at the risk of embarrassment, the courage, and Bill Clinton spoke about this just a few minutes ago, the courage attached to that. I don't think people understand. I mean, you've been to Olympics before, but it's a global event. And to do that knowing your physical limitations, but to do it anyway, and it was a defining moment of those games. It was amazing.
Well, you know, I think everybody was moved when they watched. I'm sure everybody that saw it will never forget the trembling hand, and then he did it anyway. And so I think he burned himself a little bit.
It looked like he almost did burn himself.
He did burn himself. I think he did burn himself, but he was going to do it. He was going to light that folder. But you know, his philosophy, particularly today, I think of a moment that I will never forget. I was producing the 25th anniversary of ABC's Wide World of Sports, a 2-hour primetime special on ABC. And it was going to be held on 66th Street in the great legendary TV1 studio, and it used to be a riding arena and legendary where Nixon debates and all that stuff took place. And the seating was going to be grandstand seating. And many of the greatest athletes of the century were going to be coming there to sit and be part of the show. So a couple of days, I wasn't going to have Ali or Knievel sit out with the people. I wanted them to be surprises in the show. 2 days before the event, Richard, the phone rings. Doug, it's Muhammad. Muhammad, how are you? Really great. What's going on? He says, "You're going to have me in the green room during the show. I want to be out with the people." So I said to him, "I'm glad you called. Will you come over tomorrow at noontime when the break and the studio will be empty, and I want to talk to you about how we want to incorporate you into the show." So he comes over. The studio's totally empty, except for Bob Marr was the head property man. And Bob Marr had prepared an art card, a white blank art card, and had a magic marker. As soon as he saw Ali, he was the only other guy in the studio except for Ali's brother came and so. But anyway, he comes over and he asks for the autograph. Ali goes over on a bunch of packing boxes. Now, he had just been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and it was public knowledge. And he was not floating like a butterfly anymore. And he was still speaking, but not with the same lilt. And he seemed to take an inordinate amount of time to sign his name. And I was heartbroken to see that. I really was moved. He finished, he handed the card to Bob Marr, came over, and I said, "Now, you've been on Wide World of Sports 70 times."
Wow.
70 appearances.
Wow.
Yeah, one way or another, he was on the show 70 times. I said, "We're going to climax our program with a 12-minute video tribute to you."
Wow.
And that the audience is going to see on the monitors. Then I want to discover you on a pool light at the top, upstage. He got that. he got that. He thought that was a really good idea. So let me finish the story. So he goes, then I said, then there's going to be a standing ovation, and there was 5 minutes. They stood up and applauded him. It was a big editing problem.
Yeah.
But we did.
The other thing I wanted to say about him, and again, I don't have the firsthand stories that you do, a living history lesson, but Ali taught us as well that we all fall down in life. The question is, do you get back up? Remember, it wasn't all peaches and cream when he stood up to the U.S. government and he had very little money left to survive. And he did it with dignity. It was a tough time financially. Did it with dignity, still held his head up, and look at him now.
Well, can I just finish the story? So and then I had him come down, and I said, "You'll come down and shake hands with Jim McKay." I took his hand, and I said, "Jim will look up and say to you, Muhammad, you are the greatest." He looks down, he says, "You just finding that out?" And then Bobby Marr brings he's happy and he leaves, and Bob Marr brings the card over. He hadn't taken a long time to sign his name. He had signed the following: "Service to others is the rent we pay for our room in the hereafter. Muhammad Ali."
And that's a good period for the segment.
What a day.